Hey, what's going on, guys? It's DK back at you with another video here to break down the 12-game NBA DFS slate. We go from opening night 2 games to 12 games to back to 2 games, I believe, on Thursday. So hopefully get some normal size slates. I definitely prefer, kind of the 6 to 10 slate range. 2 is too few in my opinion. 12 is a bit too much, but hey, I'm not complaining. We have NBA basketball back. Before we get into the video, though, if you guys are a first-time viewer, cover content for NFL, NBA, and player prop sites like PrizePicks, Underdog, and Parlay Play. Guys, if you're not on PrizePicks, you can use the link down below or the code DKDFS for a $100 deposit match bonus, $100 deposit match, 100% match up to $100 on PrizePicks. For some reason, I have to go incognito when I use PrizePicks, so it doesn't. I don't know. I got to message support, but right now it's not letting me bring up the board unless I have an incognito tab, which is really, really weird. So if you guys have any solutions to that, let me know. I tried restarting, tried a lot of things, and still not working. So. But yeah, if you guys, again, are interested, link is down below. And if you're looking for more content for player prop stuff for DFS, you can check my Patreon, linked in the description as well. We had an absolutely amazing preseason, hoping to continue that into the regular season. All right, so let's recap my lineup tonight. So Jonathan Kuminga picks up 2 quick ones, or 3 quick ones, I should say. Just immediately sends me over here. I told everyone, right? You have Jonathan Kuminga, it's over. Don't hold out any hope. Your money is incinerated. My money is in the fire. I was looking really good from the early games, having a good shot, and then Kuminga 3 quick ones. So my question is, how on earth did the faders know? How did they know that Kuminga would pick up 3 quick ones? So, I went to Chris Paul, D'Lo, who shot 2 of 20, Taurean Prince, Kevin Durant, Jokic, Booker, Kuminga, and Saric. Again, I'm not holding out hope now with Kuminga getting 3 fouls, and that's just so incredibly unlucky. And then so I got hooked out at 25x last night on NFL football. And then tonight, man, D'Angelo Russell had 18 points plus assists through 3 quarters. Did not record a stat in the 4th quarter to hook me there. He also missed a free throw. He also shot awful. It's just come on, man. Enough of that, right? So, had me on tilt for sure. But, all right, enough of that. Again, we don't have a lot of time to tilt because we have 12 games to talk about. So let's do it. Washington and Indiana is the first game here. So for the Washington side, you're going to see Poole, Kuzma, Gafford, Tyus Jones in the starting lineup, I think, and then one of Koulibaly or Denny Advia as the 5th starter. Now, looking at players and the price points, I think Tyus Jones is probably your best overall play on the Wizards. He should play about 30 minutes as a starting point guard. We know he has a pretty high floor, so I do like Tyus Jones a good amount. Now, Poole and Kuzma are the guys that provide that ceiling. Poole a little bit of a lower floor, Kuzma a little bit of a higher floor. I would say Poole maybe a bit of a higher ceiling than Kuzma, but that is where the offense is coming from this team. It's Poole and it's Kuzma. So I like the ceiling on both those guys quite a bit. Again, with Denny Advia and with Koulibaly, I think I prefer whoever starts. It'll be interesting to see that. And then Daniel Gafford, if he stays out of foul trouble, I think he's a reasonable option. It's just Gafford is always in foul trouble, so you always have to factor that in. Now, off the bench, I think you're going to see some DeLon Wright. You're going to see some Kispert. You're going to see some Gallinari and probably Mike Muscala. I don't have a ton of interest in any of the guys off the bench. I'm moving on to the Pacers. So Pacers, we should get a starting lineup of Halliburton, Mathurin, Bruce Brown, Obi Toppin, and Miles Turner. Now, looking at the top, Halliburton, 9.1K. There's a lot of good spend-ups in the slate, but this is a really good matchup, and, Halliburton is a guy that can stuff the stat sheet, so I think he's a good spend-up. Miles Turner in the mid-range, I think is an interesting tournament play. He is a guy that does have a ceiling and is reasonable price point, plus I like the spot for him as well. Mathurin at 5'4", I think he's going to take a bit of a leap here in year 2. Going to rely on a bit more offensively. I think he's interesting. Bruce Brown's reasonable. But the play that stands out the most to me is a min-price Obi Toppin. I'm not sure what DraftKings was thinking here. I think Obi Toppin's one of the best, if not the best values in the board. The starting power forward. I expect, high 20s minutes for him. So I really like Obi Toppin at that price point. Off the bench, you're going to see McConnell back up Halliburton. Don't love the price point on him. Hield will get some minutes. Nembhard will play. I think Jalen Smith gets the backup 5. So not a ton of interest in anyone really off the bench. I think Obi, definitely my favorite play in the Pacers. All right, Atlanta and Charlotte. So Atlanta's starting lineup should be Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, DeAndre Hunter, Capella. And the 5th starter, it's either going to be Sadiq Bey or Jalen Johnson. We'll see. They kind of went back and forth in the preseason. But as far as the top end guys go, I mean, Trae Young, we know has a massive ceiling, and this is a really good matchup. So, yeah, I like the ceiling quite a bit on him. DeJounte Murray's kind of just there. 8K, kind of hard for me to prioritize him in a 12-game slate. You're going to see Capella and Okongwu kind of splitting the center position. No real strong takes on either. Jalen Johnson intrigues me at 3-5, especially if he starts. Even if he comes off the bench, I kind of like him. Good point per minute guy. If he starts, I really like him. I would say he's right there with Obi Toppin. So we'll monitor the starting lineup there. And then, yeah, Bay's fine. Bogdanovich is okay as well. But let's move on to Charlotte. Charlotte going to be, in my opinion, one of the worst teams in the league. You got LaMelo Ball. I mean, he's pricey, but he's going to be relied on a ton. And this is a game I could see shooting out to teams that, play not so good of defense. So LaMelo, if you can afford him, I think is a good spend up. Rozier, kind of looks similar to DeJounte Murray. I think I would slightly prefer Rozier to Murray at a little bit of a discount. You got Washington and Hayward kind of in the mid-range, just there for me. Mark Williams will start the 5. Him and Nick Richards will split the center position. They're both reasonable values. Miller will play some off the bench. I don't love the price point on him. This is a really, really bad bench. You got Martin is out. They did just sign Ish Smith. I'm curious to see if he'll be available, but really not a ton of interest in the bench unit. I think LaMelo, probably my favorite play there at the top. Rozier is solid. And then the two centers, I think, are decent values. Houston and Orlando. So Houston, you got a starting lineup of Van Fleet, Jalen Green, Brooks, Jabari Smith, and Şengün. So looking at players and the price points, I think the two guys that stand out to me would be Şengün and Jabari Smith. Jabari Smith been much more aggressive on offense in the preseason. I think he's going to take a bit of a step forward here in year 2 as well. So I like the price point on him a good amount. I like the matchup. And then Şengün at 6'7", I think probably plays around 30 minutes. So the two front court guys I'm pretty high on for the Rockets, Şengün and Jabari Smith. The backcourt, Van Fleet, Jalen Green, and Dylan Brooks are all okay options. I think my favorite of the backcourt probably would be Jalen Green. Jalen Green does have a ceiling, but also a pretty low floor. Off the bench, you're going to see Thompson play some backup point. I think you see a little bit of Whitmore, a little bit of Jayshawn Tate, probably a little bit of Reggie Bullock, and maybe some Jock. You will see Jock Landale play the backup 5. I think Landale's a little bit interesting. If Şengün gets in foul trouble, a 3.2K Landale, I think, is an okay value play. All right, let's move on to Orlando. So Orlando, you should get the starting lineup of Fultz, Suggs, Franz Wagner, Banchero, and Wendell Carter Jr. Banchero at 9K, that feels priced about right. Carter Jr. and Franz, I think, are decent options in the mid-range. I like the spot for them going up against Houston. Markelle Fultz is intriguing here at a 5.7K price point. He's a guy that has a pretty high ceiling. He was a little bit up and down last year, but I do like his upside. Suggs is fine. Cole Anthony off the bench is reasonable. Mo Wagner will play the backup big. And then you should see some Joe Ingles, maybe a little bit of Jonathan Isaac in the rotation as well. Boston and New York. So Boston, looking at player, well, you're going to get the starting lineup of, well, I guess it depends. It's going to be 5 of the 6. It's either probably going to be White or Horford that does not start. I guess they could bring Drew off the bench too. But either way, like these 6 are going to play a good chunk of the game. Now, looking at the salaries, I think Porzingis would be my favorite point per dollar play at 7.2K. He looked good in the preseason. And, I like the spot for him a good amount, like the salary. So I do like Porzingis a good amount. Tatum and Brown, no real strong takes at their respective price points. And then I like Drew Holiday at 6'1". That feels a little bit too cheap. Derek White, I think, is a good option mid-range as well. So I think my favorite options would be these mid-range plays for Boston. Porzingis, Holiday, and Derek White. Horford, I think I would rather go to the other guys we just talked about. And then I do think you see some Pritchard and some Hauser to round out the rotation. Maybe a little bit of Luke Cornett. I think Boston's going to run a pretty tight rotation, 8 to 9 man rotation. Again, with production coming from mainly the top 6 guys. Moving on to the Knicks, Randall 8'4", Brunson 7'6". I think they're fine options. I think I prefer Brunson to Randall point per dollar. The other starters will be Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, and Quentin Grimes. Let's see. I don't really have any strong takes on any of those guys. Quickly will come off the bench and Chuck, but I don't love the price point on him. You're going to see Hart and DiVincenzo play some decent minutes off the bench. Again, the price points aren't amazing. Hartenstein will play the backup 5. Not a ton that I love here on the Knicks bench. All right, Minnesota and Toronto. So no McDaniels for the Timberwolves. I'm expecting my boy NAW to pick up the start. So I think we get a starting lineup of Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert. Now looking at the top end guys, Ant at 9.6, Cat at 8.6. I think I slightly prefer Cat point per dollar to Ant. Gobert at 7.1 is always kind of just there. He will have those pop-off games here and there when he has, 4 or 5 blocks. Conley, I don't love the price point on him. NAW, I think, would be my favorite point per dollar play, assuming he starts. And I think he does. Should see, mid-20s minutes, maybe a little bit more. And he has a nice eligibility as well. So I do like a min-price Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I do expect to start. And then off the bench, you'll see some slow-mo. You'll see my boy Naz Reid. You'll see Shake Milton and probably a little bit of Troy Brown. Milton and Reid should kind of run the second unit. Price points are up a little bit on both, but I think they're fair value plays for sure. All right, so let's talk Toronto. So Toronto, you should have a starting lineup of Dennis Schroeder, Scotty Barnes, Siakam, OG Anunoby, and Jakob Poeltl. I think my favorite point per dollar play of the starters would be Scotty Barnes. I think he's going to take a big leap forward here without Fred VanVleet. Going to be relied on a bit more offensively, also for playmaking as well. So I like the eligibility in Scotty Barnes. I like the price point. I think he's my favorite starter. Siakam feels a little bit pricey there at 10-1. I also like Jakob Poeltl at 5.9K. I mean, I'm expecting him to play around 30 minutes. We know he's about a fantasy point per minute guy. He's probably my second favorite starter. And then you got OG and Schroeder rounding out the starting lineup. Off the bench, Gary Trent will come off the bench and chuck. He's always playable in tournaments. You'll see some McDaniels. You'll see some Boucher and some Achua. Boucher is a good point per minute guy, but it's always just a question of, how many minutes will he play? All right, Cleveland and Brooklyn. So Cleveland, we got no Jared Allen and possibly no Darius Garland. So I think we can definitely get some value here for Cleveland. Now, if Darius Garland does not play, you should have LeVert in the starting lineup. So you'll have Mitchell, you'll have LeVert, you'll have Strus, you'll have Mobley. And I'm not sure who they go to the fifth starter. Could be a few different guys. I mean, they could go big and maybe throw in like a Thompson or Damian Jones. I mean, they could go a little bit smaller, maybe throw a Coro in the starting lineup. They have Niang as well. But yeah, if there's no Garland, I mean, I think offense is going to be pretty condensed. Like, we know where the offense would be coming from. Mitchell at the top at 9.4. If there's no Garland, I think it would make for a pretty good spend up. But I think my favorite plays here would be Mobley and LeVert. Mobley, if he starts at the 5 too, I think that gives him a pretty big bump. So I do like Mobley a good amount here without Jarrett Allen. And again, a good price point on him. LeVert, if he starts, should be the secondary playmaker behind Donovan Mitchell. So I think he'd be a really good value with a nice eligibility. And Max Strus should play a lot too. I mean, reasonable price point. Again, nice eligibility. So there's actually a good amount to like here for Cleveland, especially if Darius Garland is out. And then again, Yang 3.4, Okoro 3.2, I think are interesting values, especially if Darius Garland is not playing. So Cleveland, we'll keep an eye on the news, but I think there'd be a good amount to like there if Garland does not play. Let's talk about Brooklyn. So Brooklyn, you should get a starting lineup of Ben Simmons, Dinwiddie, Bridges, Cam Johnson, and Nick Claxton. I think my favorite point per dollar play of the starters would be Ben Simmons, a guy that can stuff a stat sheet. I'm expecting around 30 minutes or so from him, sub 6K price point. I think he's my favorite net. Bridges does have a ceiling, but also has shown a floor. Dinwiddie, don't love the price point on him. I think Claxton would probably be my second favorite of the starters. I'm expecting around 30 minutes from him, so he feels like a pretty good point per dollar play. Don't love Cam Johnson. Off the bench, you're going to see Cam Thomas. I think he's playable in tournaments. I expect him to come off the bench and chuck. You see some Royce O'Neal. You see some Dorian Finney-Smith. You probably see Day'Ron Sharpe play the backup 5. But yeah, I think my favorite of these bench guys would be Cam Thomas at 3.7. All right, second half of the games, we got Detroit and Miami. Now for the Pistons, starting lineup will be Cade, Thompson, Stewart, Duren, and then either Ivy or Alec Burks as the fifth starter. Some preseason games, they've been bringing Ivy off the bench, so we'll see what they do. Don't love the price point of Cade at 9K going up against Miami. I think my favorite point per dollar play in the Pistons probably would be Jalen Duren. Starting center, I'm expecting probably at least 25 or so minutes from him. So I like Duren. I think the rookie, Stuart Thompson, is also interesting. He played well in the preseason, and again, he's got the small shooting guard, small forward eligibility. Ivy, especially if he comes to the bench, and the backup big will either be Bagley or Wiseman. I'm not sure which, so I'm not going to risk it on this 12-game slate. So let's move on to Miami. I think the guy that really stands out here is Tyler Hero, 6.3K. I think he's one of the best plays in the mid-range on the slate. I really like Tyler Hero. Expecting a starting lineup of Lowry, Hero, Jimmy, Love, and Bam Adebayo. I think Bam also looks good, sub 8K going up against this Pistons team. So really like Hero, really like Bam. Jimmy, I would rather get to Hero or Bam for less. And then Love, if he starts, I actually think he's a pretty good value. We know Kevin Love's kind of dusty at this point of his career, but he's about a fantasy point per minute guy. If you give him like 20, 25 minutes, yeah, sign me up for a 4.1K Kevin Love. Barton will play, but it's going to be limited, so probably can't go there. Thomas Bryant's going to back up Bam. I think he's a viable tournament play. You'll see some Duncan Robinson in the rotation as well. The flat min price, I think he's a little bit interesting for tournaments, but I think there's a lot of better value plays on the board. All right, New Orleans and Memphis. So New Orleans, you're going to get the starting lineup of CJ, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Herbert Jones, and Jonas Valanciunas. Of the starters, I think they're all kind of just like there for me. I don't love anyone in New Orleans, but I'm not going to talk you off them if you land any of the main guys of Zion, Ingram, CJ, or JV. Herb Jones, I'll probably pass on him. Off the bench, you're going to see Larry Nance play some backup 4, backup 5. You're going to see, in my opinion, with Jose Alvarado out, Dyson Daniels get some backup point guard run. You probably see, again, they're pretty thin, the Pelicans. Maybe a little bit of Hawkins, maybe a little bit of Kira Lewis, but I expect good minutes here from the starters. Moving on to Memphis. So I really like the price points here on the Grizzlies. No John Morant, obviously, no Aldama. I mean, Bane 7'4", Triple J at 6'6". I really like both in the mid-range. I think Bane is probably a little bit safer just because Jaren Jackson, we know, is very, very foul prone. But I like the two main guys quite a bit here for Memphis. And I think Marcus Smart is very safe too. Expect him to start. Expect him to play around 30 minutes. So I like a lot here from Memphis. Tillman should start the 5. I think he's a reasonable play. I think the 5th starter will be Zaire Williams, just on what we've seen from the preseason. So I think they're going to go Smart, Bane, Williams, Triple J, and Tillman. Off the bench, I think you see D. Rose. I think you see Luke Kennard. I think you see some Anchar. I think you see a little bit of Roddy. Maybe even a little bit of Lofton since they're thin in the front court. Or they get to stagger Jaren Jackson and Xavier Tillman as the bigs. If I had to play one of these bench guys, I think it would be a 3.5K Derrick Rose, who even though he is dust, still not a bad fantasy point per minute guy. All right, Oklahoma City and Chicago. So starters will be SGA, Giddey, Jalen Williams, Dort, and Chet Holmgren. SGA at 10.5 feels a little bit pricey. I think Giddey is a bit easier to get to, but I think my favorite options on the Thunder would be the two mid-range guys, Chet at 6.5 and Jalen Williams at 6K. Jalen Williams has the green light. He's been chucking in the preseason, and I expect that to continue here in the regular season. So I like him, and I like Chet at a 6.5K price point as well. So those two are my favorite options here on the Thunder. Lou Dort, I would just rather get to Williams or Chet. Now, off the bench, a little bit tricky for what I think the bench rotation will look like for the Thunder. I think you're going to see some Ousmane Dieng off the bench. He's 3K. I think he's a viable tournament play. I think Olivier Sarr will play the backup 5. I think you see some Isaiah Joe, maybe a little Trey Mann, maybe a little Cason Wallace, but I'm a little bit unclear exactly of where they're going to go. You could see some Misic as well. But they have a lot of different ways they can go. So the bench unit, and we know the Thunder, they usually run a deeper rotation, so I think if I had to play someone on the bench, it would be Ousmane Dieng. All right, Chicago. So Chicago should run a starting lineup of Kobe White, Zach LaVine, DeRozan, Pat Williams, and Vucevic. I mean, I think the big three for the Bulls are all a little bit too cheap. 7-1 for DeRozan, 6-9 for Vooch, 6-8 for LaVine. I think my favorite of the three would be Vucevic, who should be able to have his way inside on a guy like Chet or even Olivier Sarr. So yeah, I think Vooch is in a really good spot here. I don't love the price point of Pat Williams. I do like Kobe White for value. I'm expecting him to play around 30 minutes. So I think he's a pretty good value play. Off the bench, you'll see Caruso, you'll see Drummond, you'll see some Io, and some Torrey Craig. That's what I think the bench rotation will look like. We know Drummond's a good point per minute guy, but the price point is a little bit up on him. Caruso, reasonable value as well. I think I'd rather play Kobe White, though. All right, Sacramento and Utah. So same starters for Sacramento will be Fox, Sabonis, Herter, Murray, and Barnes. The two spend-ups in Sabonis and Fox obviously both have a ceiling. I think point per dollar, I prefer Fox straight up. I would rather get to Sabonis. The wings are all kind of there for me, Herter, Murray, and Barnes. I always have a really hard time playing these guys in a big slate. Usually these are guys that are more in consideration for me when the slate is smaller. I guess if I had to pick one, I think it would be second-year guy at Keegan Murray. Off the bench, Monk's going to shoot. He's going to come off the bench and chuck, but price point's not great on him. You're going to see Davion Mitchell off the bench. I think you're going to see some Vezkanev off the bench. My guess is McGee plays the backup big. They do have Alex Len too, though, but if it is McGee that plays the backup 5, I actually think he's an okay punt play, well north of a fantasy point per minute guy. All right, the Utah Jazz. I'm expecting the Jazz to start Clarkson, THT, Markkanen, Collins, and Kessler. If you have the salary for Markkanen, he is in a decent spot here. But yeah, if Jordan Clarkson starts, I do like the price point on him a good amount, especially if he sees 30-plus minutes. So I think Clarkson's a really interesting play. I'm fine with Kessler. I think THT would be my next favorite of the starters. He's cheap. I mean, if he starts with this eligibility, I think he's a pretty good value play. He did play well in the preseason as well. John Collins is kind of indifferent on him. And then off the bench, you're going to see some Olynyk. We know it's a good point from a guy. You're going to see some Sexton. You're going to see some Bocce, maybe a little Fontecchio. I think Keontae George may or may not be in the rotation to start the year, but I think he's definitely someone that will be in the rotation as the year goes on. All right, a couple games left. We got Dallas and San Antonio. So for Dallas, a couple things to monitor. Obviously, Luka is huge news. Dwight Powell also a little bit banged up as well. Now, if Luka Doncic does not play, I think Kyrie Irving's going to become a really, really good spend up. If Luka plays, I think that what they're going to do with the starting lineup, I think it will be Luka, Kyrie, Josh Green, Grant Williams, and Derek Lively. That's my guess for the starting lineup for Dallas. If Luka does play 11K, he's right there as one of the better spend ups. Doncic, obviously the injury is a little bit concerning, but if he plays, I think you got to really like Luka. And then Hardaway should play some off the bench. I don't love the price point on him, though. Seth Curry will play off the bench. I do think you probably see a little bit of Dante Exum, Maxi Kleba, maybe some Hardy if he's available. I think Grant Williams at a sub 4K price point is a solid value. He's not a guy that they're going to rely on a ton offensively, but he can do a little bit of everything. He can knock down some corner threes, get some blocks and steals. So I think he's a reasonable value play there. I don't love the price point on Lively, even if he starts, probably a little bit too much for me. San Antonio. So San Antonio, they're going to go to the big starting lineup, right? With Point Sohan. So Sohan, Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Wembanyama, and Zach Collins will be the starters. I think Wembanyama looks like a really good spend up as long as we don't get popped, right? As long as Popovich doesn't troll with the minutes. I mean, if we get 30 plus minutes from an 8.5K Wembanyama, sign me up for that. I think it'll be a relatively popular play, but I definitely have a lot of interest in Wembanyama. Keldon and Vassell, they're reasonable options. I don't love them, don't hate them, but I do like guys like Zach Collins and Jeremy Sohan. Collins looked really good in the preseason, assuming he does play. I love the price point on Collins, and I really like Jeremy Sohan too, a 4.7K starting point guard. So sign me up for some Sohan and Collins. If Collins does not go, expect Bassey to start. If Bassey starts, he'd be a really good value, so we'll monitor the situation there. Even so, Bassey is still playable as the backup big. We know he's well above a fantasy point per minute player. Trey Jones will play off the bench, but again, I don't love the price point on him. I think you're going to see a little bit of my boy Chetty Osman. I think you see some Doug McDermott. I think Chetty is a little bit interesting for GBPs at 3.3K. All right, final game here. Portland and the Clippers. I will say this game has a little bit of blowout risk, but starters should be Scoot Henderson, Simons, Thibault, Jeremy Grant, and DeAndre Ayton. I think looking at players and their salaries, Simons and Scoot would be my favorite options. Simons is going to shoot a ton with this roster. He's going to be probably their go-to guy offensively, so I like his upside quite a bit. Scoot should play a lot. He played, kind of up and down in the preseason. He was very foul prone too. I do want to mention that Scoot got in massive foul trouble a couple times in the preseason, so just be careful with that. I think he is. You're definitely going to be tilting Scoot a lot with fouls this year if we base it on the preseason. DeAndre Ayton, Rob Williams, they will split the center position. They're both fine. Jeremy Grant's there. Brogdon will play some off the bench. I think the main guys to look to again would be Simons and would be Scoot Henderson. Finally, the Clippers. So we got no Terrence Mann. Bones Highland is questionable. Starters will be Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Westbrook, Zubac, and then probably one of Robert Covington or Nick Batum with Terrence Mann out. Looking at players and their salaries, I think of the main three guys, Westbrook is probably the easiest to get to at a 6.5K salary. Kawhi and Paul George in a great spot. Obviously do have a ceiling. Zubac, he'll split the center position with Plumlee. I like the ceiling a little bit more with Zubac. I think he plays high 20s minutes. And then Bones, if he does play, is always playable off the bench. If not, I think Norman Powell looks a little bit better. He'll probably run the second unit if Bones is out. Whoever starts between Batum and Covington, I think, is an interesting value play. So we'll keep an eye on the situation there. All right, guys. So that's going to do it for the video. 12 games up, 12 games down. If you do enjoy, again, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'll have a lot of content up. I'll have a video up talking about some props as well. So keep an eye out for that one. But really appreciate you guys watching. Have a great rest of your night. Good luck tomorrow, and I'll see you in the next video.